We're going to continue to explore the world. We're going to continue to write about opportunities that exist for better living, for better retirement, for traveling in unusual and creative ways. We're going to keep doing that because this is eventually going to go away, and we're going to get back to exploring the world. This is Jen Stevens, and I am the executive editor of International Living and the author of Great Escape Publishing's Ultimate Travel Writers Program. And I'm here today to talk not actually about the best places in the world to live and retire and travel, but really to talk about travel writing, to talk about to the writers and the would-be writers out there about what you do in this world when we can't actually go out and travel. What are travel publications doing, and what are travel writers doing, or what should travel writers be doing? So I guess I should start by saying travel writing, to my mind, is at its most basic, it's writing about the world in a way that aims to educate and excite people to go. And practically speaking, travel writing shows you how to go do that, how to go out and explore the world. A lot of the travel writing that gets published today is really about the practical side of travel writing, right? It's about where to go and how to get there and what to do when you arrive, and the best places, the best ways to explore the world. Now, I think there are really more opportunities today for travel writers to get published than there ever were before. In the old world, it used to be that we had just publications that were print publications, and if you wanted to write for them, you would mail the editor an idea or your story, and that editor would decide if they wanted it or not, and they would give you a call or they would mail something back to you. It was epically inefficient. But then the internet changed everything when it came to travel writing. I mean, there are so many more publications, so many ways to get published online and these days than there ever were 20 years ago. It's a world of opportunity. And I should say too that the internet is a very visual medium. It used to be in the old world that you had your travel writers and you had your travel photographers, and nary shall the two meet. Publications didn't hire one person to do both those things. But when the internet came along, we discovered that, in fact, if you had photos and even video to illustrate your story, you could sell that story more readily. And so that's good news for you as a travel writer. Of course, no one's traveling right now, right? We're all stuck at home. And so what is a travel writer to do? When you think about it, I always say when I teach travel writing that you really have to think about audience first. You have to think about who you are writing for. And right now, the appeal of travel hasn't waned in any way. We're just all kind of stuck at home. And so as we go through this pandemic, we have to think, like, where is the mind of a traveler who's interested in going someplace eventually, right? You need to write to that audience. I should say as well that, travel publications aren't going to go away because we're all stuck at home for a few months. Here at International Living, for example, we're going to continue to explore the world. We're going to continue to write about opportunities that exist for better living, for better retirement, for traveling in unusual and creative ways. We're going to keep doing that because this is eventually going to go away, and we're going to get back to exploring the world. But right now we are in a moment when we really need to pivot a little bit, certainly more readily with the online stuff than we can with print. I mean, we've sent our publications, the April issue went to print long ago, and the May issue has already gone to print. And so, we're kind of trying, we can't address this specifically in every article because the world is changing so quickly in regards to this pandemic. And so we're not really trying to. Online, however, we are trying to think about, okay, where's our reader right now? So if you're writing in the travel field right now, that's kind of what you need to be thinking about too. How can you pivot to apply the lessons and what you know about a reader who likes to travel? What can you do to speak to that reader right now? I have some notes and some recommendations here. One thing, I think I lost you guys there for a minute. One thing we can do is help people to figure out how they can get out in the world, but do it from home. And by that I mean, everybody is sort of traveling vicariously. I think we're all so sick of watching the news and about what's going on in the world, and it's so depressing and terrifying that we want an escape of some sort. And so think about ways you as a writer can provide that. There was a really cute piece in Afar magazine recently, just a few days ago, about the flaneur. That's somebody who wanders about with a little bit of purpose, and it was an article about how to walk around your neighborhood as a flaneur. That's a really creative way to take a travel writing idea and bring it to somebody who's essentially stuck at home. I'm sure you've seen stories about virtual tours at museums or at zoos, that kind of thing. The New York Times has a piece, I think it was in today or yesterday's paper, about the best TV shows for vicarious travelers, right? What could you do with movies? Think about movies that are set in places that you love and write about that. Think about stories that will let people dream a little bit, the best beaches. If you were going to recommend to parents the 5 things that they should teach their children about travel or about the world or about exploring the world, what would those be? Special places that people don't tend to know about, that you might write about now to explore them in a way that they might not get press at a time when things are normal, right? So think about those kinds of stories. How can you bring the world to people when they're at home? Another thing you could do, there's a lot of travel that's written these days that's how-to. Just kind of practical tips and ideas for people. It could be tech tips. It could be anything, gear stuff. It could just be practical stuff about how to explore a particular location. Well, take that how-to angle and gear it toward the person who's stuck at home. I was thinking, for example, a cool story would be the best ways to create albums from your travel photos. Everybody goes these days, we all have our phones, we travel, we take tons of pictures, and then, I'm sure there are some people out there who are really organized, but I'm not one of them. So I would not say that I then come home and put all of my books in, or all my photos into a lovely travel book. But you know what? If someone wrote an article about 3 great resources for doing that and what you need to know about doing it, this might be a good time for people who like to travel to organize their photos and get them into little books. Another how-to might be how you could use this time wisely to travel for the future, right? How can you plan your travel? What do we think is going to happen with airlines and with pricing and with tour companies? Do a little research, call the organizations that are running tours and that kind of thing. Try to figure out what trends are on the horizon and write about that. What would your reader do to take advantage of those things? Talk about ways that you might connect with what's going on near you, so that when people, I feel like people are going to really be interested in their own communities when this is done. This is a global pandemic. This is awful everywhere, but I think that we're all feeling a little like, what can I do in my own community to help people? Well, as a travel writer, as a traveler, one thing you can do is figure out, as soon as this is done, what can I do in my town or my state to help the travel industry here? So think about that as a how-to. How could you help people in your local community bring your own tourism industry back into the fold once we can all get out there again? There's some story ideas in that, I think. Another thing I would say is that in the regular world, when everyone is busy and out and about traveling, it's harder to sell narrative travel stories. What people more often sell and what editors are buying are stories that are just more practical minded. They're more how to. There's listicles, the 5 best this, the 6 best this, the 4 best ways to whatever. And they're very, they're not narrative particularly. But I think that this is a time when editors are going to be more willing to buy narrative stories. And so for example, I was a Peace Corps volunteer 25 years ago in Africa. And I think often about the people I met and the transformative experiences that I had. I think about how no matter how extremely different my experiences were from the people where I was living, we had so much in common just as humans. And that's a pretty powerful lesson, I think, for someone in their 20s to learn. I think that writing about those kinds of transformative travel experiences now allow people who are stuck at home to have a sort of armchair travel experience. It's a way for them to travel vicariously. And so think about those moments in your own travel experiences that have changed you and informed the way you see the world and you experience the world, and write about that. I think there's a market for that we haven't seen in a long time, and that actually would be a great thing. Think also about telling stories that about those transformative travel experiences that inspire connectedness, inspire hope, inspire kindness. I think in this crazy world, we are reacting to those things. We are craving that connectedness and that hope and that kindness. And if you can write into that space and tell stories that evoke those feelings in people, you'll be able to sell those stories. As I said before, pitch local stories. This, I think, in some ways could be the golden age of the local writer. When you think about it, from right where you are sitting at a desk, you could write 5 stories about where you live because you live there, right? So you know what's going on there. And someone who's coming through as a travel writer isn't going to find the same kinds of things you are as a local. And so I think this is a great time for you to connect with local publications in your area and with outside publications, pitching them stories about where you live. Another thing I would recommend is you start thinking about characters. Think about the people that you know and the people that you could write about in your local community, and not necessarily even in your local community. Good writing is good writing generally, and my travel writer course that I wrote, I spend a good portion of that talking about how to write well. We're doing it, of course, through a travel writing lens, but the truth of the matter is the advice that I'm giving and the guidance and the specifics about how you put a good story together are true whether you're writing about travel or you're writing about architecture or you're writing about reading or you're writing about movies or you're writing about people or anything else. And so people are doing really inspiring and interesting and extraordinary things always, but I think particularly in these crazy times. And so bringing some of their stories to light, that's a wonderful service you're providing, I think, for your community. But also it's a great way to get something published right now. So that's how I would say that those are some of the ideas I would suggest for ways to pivot in this time when things are so uncertain and you can't be out and about traveling. Now, eventually, we are going to get back to that time when we can travel. And I would say that if someone asked me once, what's so great about being a travel writer? And I would just say that I think when you travel as a writer, you just pay more attention to what's going on around you. You're not a passive observer. You are an active participant in what's going on. You have to be, because you're going to have to put down in words what this is all about and what you're experiencing. And so it forces you to live more in the moment. And that, frankly, is just a richer way to experience the world. And so if you're interested, if you like to travel and you're interested in writing, you don't have to have a lot of experience to be a travel writer. You don't have to have ever sold stories before or anything like that. I've taught lots of people over the years who were anything from physicists to massage therapists to teachers. I mean, they ran the gamut in their backgrounds, but a lot of them have said to me, I always liked to write, but I figured I could never write for a living, or people always told me I was a good writer, and I always thought that would be fun, but you know, I went off and I became a nurse because that's where the money was, or whatever it might be. But if that sounds like you and you're interested in traveling and writing about the places you're going, then I would encourage you to give it a try. It isn't rocket science. There are formulas, and in the course I wrote, certainly I explain what they all are. Anyway, I don't know if people have any questions for me here. I don't think I'm going to look and see here if I can scroll down. Let's see. Doesn't look like I see any. Well, if you have questions after, go ahead and let me know what they are, and I will type you up some answers. There's more information on the little link on the screen there. And thanks for joining me. This was fun. Everybody stay safe, and I hope I'll see you out and about somewhere cool and exciting in the world soon. Okay, bye.